"Make her stop crying or I will," the woman snapped, then pressed a plastic mailer bag over the newborn's tiny face. "By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below." The breath left the room before the breath left the child. The crisis spiraled in seconds, gasping, panic, and a father's instincts detonating under the weight of danger he hoped he'd never see again. And while the world saw only a quiet janitor on his porch, they had no idea what stood up inside him the moment that baby's chest stuttered for air. What happened next didn't just expose cruelty, it exposed everything people overlook until the moment they're forced to confront who truly holds the real power in a life or death moment. Because this story isn't about noise, it's about survival disguised as silence. Before I show you the exact second the doctor slammed his clipboard and demanded security on camera, we go back to the porch, the place where a father's world nearly collapsed. "Don't you dare touch her," he growled, ripping the plastic away with a speed that made the woman stumble back. She muttered something about quiet hours and neighborhood standards. But his world had narrowed to one thing: the limp-bodied infant in his arms and the rattling breath that wasn't returning fast enough. His hands didn't shake. That was the first sign something was different about him. Calm wasn't supposed to be possible here, but calm rose anyway. Old training buried under grief and exhaustion, sliding back into place like muscle memory waking from sleep. He tilted Nova's head just right, cleared her airway, checked the sternum, counted the seconds between the shallow pulls she managed. Each movement was quiet, precise, practiced. Not like a man working a job mopping hospital floors, but like someone who'd done this before, someone who'd had lives depend on it. He didn't think about calling 911. He was already dialing. Didn't think about Morella's shrill protests. Her voice was background noise to the mechanical, methodical fight to keep his daughter's chest moving. The dispatcher told him to stay calm. He already was. Too calm for this to be the first emergency of his life. He scooped Nova up with one arm, grabbed his keys with the other, and moved. The woman kept shouting something about rules, but he wasn't listening. He wasn't seeing the neighborhood anymore, just the route to the hospital, the path he'd rehearsed in his head since the day he became a father alone. Inside the car, he stabilized her again, 2 fingers behind the jawline, one palm tucked to keep her airway open. The world outside blurred, traffic blurred, his breath didn't. He breathed steadily so she could. That was how he trained himself years ago. Never panic faster than the person you're trying to save. The hospital came into view like a lifeline, sliding open its doors with fluorescent urgency. He sprinted inside. Nurses shouted for a gurney. He didn't wait for one. He was already on his knees, placing Nova gently on the floor, checking her breathing again. Someone yelled, "Sir, step back!" He didn't, because she wasn't a case. She was his child, and she needed oxygen now. His fingers worked with uncanny speed, jaw thrust, airway alignment, micro-compressions suited for infant lungs. Nurses froze. They shouldn't have. They'd never seen a janitor work like this. A nurse named Lena knelt beside him, eyes wide, recognition flickering. "Where did you learn?" "Bag valve mask. Now," he clipped, and she obeyed. The moment the baby inhaled properly, her chest rising with something closer to a rhythm, he exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. But the emergency wasn't over, not for him. He stayed beside her as staff rushed her down the hall. Lena jogged beside them, recording for medical documentation. She kept glancing back at him like she was trying to understand something she couldn't place. When Dr. Calder stormed into the lobby moments later, he demanded a briefing. Lena told him the cause. Her voice trembled as she said it. The doctor froze mid-stride. "A plastic bag? Over a newborn's head?" "Yes," she whispered. The clipboard in his hand crashed to the floor. "What kind of human does that? Get security, get CPS, get police, now!" He wasn't shouting for show. He wasn't thinking about cameras. His outrage was real. Raw, unfiltered fury at a violation he had only read about in worst-case training sessions. And Lena's phone, still recording the chaos for chart accuracy, captured every second. The janitor stood in the hallway, shirt damp with sweat and fear, watching doctors swarm the baby he'd just pulled back from the edge. His calm remained, but the storm behind his eyes didn't fade. Not yet. Not while his daughter still fought for every breath. Behind him, Morella Voss burst through the hospital doors, ranting about misunderstandings and overreactions, trying to claim she never meant harm. Her voice didn't matter, not anymore. The crisis had moved beyond her control the moment she crossed a line no rulebook could defend. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. All he saw was Nova's tiny chest rising inside the trauma bay. Too slow, too shaky, but rising. This was only the beginning, because when danger reveals the truth about people, the world doesn't stay quiet, and neither do the consequences. The trauma bay doors sealed shut, leaving him alone in the hallway with his pulse still pounding like a war drum buried under civilian clothes. Nova's fragile breaths were now in the hands of a full medical team, but the instinct to stand guard didn't loosen. If anything, it rooted deeper. He stayed close, not hovering, not interfering, just watching with the same unyielding focus that once kept soldiers alive in places far darker than hospital corridors. Behind him, Morella's voice rose again, shrill, defensive, frantic. "This is a misunderstanding. I didn't hurt anyone. I barely touched the child." Nurses turned, their eyes cold with disbelief. The hospital wasn't her HOA meeting room. The air didn't bend for her. Here, her words hit walls instead of people. Security escorted her toward a waiting area, and she kept shouting variations of innocence, volume rising each time someone didn't take her seriously. He didn't react, didn't flinch, just kept staring through the small trauma window where Nova's tiny silhouette trembled under warming lights. Dr. Calder reappeared minutes later, face grim, gloves still on. He approached like a storm, controlled, but undeniably violent beneath the surface. "She's breathing on her own," he said first, because he understood priorities. Shallow, but stable. The air left his lungs in a silent release. Then the doctor's gaze sharpened. "Tell me exactly what happened on that porch." He told the truth plainly. No embellishments, no dramatics. She grabbed a mailer bag from a package and pressed it over Nova's face. It lasted a second, maybe less. His tone stayed level, but the tension beneath it made the walls feel tighter. "A second for a newborn can be catastrophic," the doctor muttered. "And she did this to enforce quiet?" "Yes." Calder's jaw clenched so hard it clicked. "She could have killed her." He nodded once. He already knew. Security returned and quietly informed the doctor that local police had been notified. "Good," Calder snapped. "They need to see this for themselves." A nurse approached them, tablet in hand, voice shaky. "Doctor, the recording," Calder blinked. "Recording? It's from intake. I was documenting the emergency for our system. The whole thing captured your reaction." He frowned. "My reaction?" "Yes, sir." She turned the screen around. On it was a shaky but clear view of the doctor slamming his clipboard, shouting for security, demanding CPS, police, accountability. His outrage poured through the speakers like fire, a rare, unfiltered medical fury. The janitor stood still beside them. He watched the clip without comment, without judgment. Some might have panicked at such exposure. He didn't. His face didn't change. He wasn't used to being the center of anything. The world usually passed him by without noticing him at all. Calder's expression tightened as he watched himself. "This is strong," he admitted. "People need to understand how serious this was, but—" The nurse interrupted softly. "Sir, it's already posted. Someone in the lobby uploaded it before we could stop them. It's spreading fast." "How fast?" Calder asked sharply. She swallowed. "Thousands of views already, maybe more." Behind them, another nurse whispered, "It's trending!" Phones buzzed across the unit. The doctor dragged a hand down, his face, frustration and conviction blending into something sharper. "Fine, let it spread. Maybe people will finally understand the danger of putting power in the wrong hands." The janitor didn't respond. He just kept watching through the trauma window, counting Nova's breaths through the rise and fall of the oxygen mask. For him, this wasn't about viral attention. It was about air entering her lungs without struggle. Police arrived moments later, 2 officers, calm but alert. Calder briefed them first, pointing to the trauma room where Nova lay recovering. Then he gestured toward Morella, who sat in a chair muttering into her phone, mascara running down her cheeks, panic replacing arrogance inch by inch. "She endangered a newborn," Calder said firmly. You need to take this seriously." The officers nodded, approaching her with caution. "Ma'am, we need your statement. Please stand." Morella lurched to her feet. "This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything. He's lying." "He isn't," the doctor replied, voice like steel. "And you're done pretending otherwise." Security played back the hospital's exterior footage, showing her stepping onto the porch, raising her hand, the plastic bag in view for the briefest moment. Not perfect evidence, but enough to crack her narrative. The officers exchanged looks. One approached the janitor. "Sir, your daughter is receiving care. We'll need to get your statement when you're ready, but your priority is her." He nodded. "I'm not going anywhere." The doctor crossed his arms, studying him with a new curiosity. "You stabilized her fast, faster than most trainees." His voice dipped. "You've done this before." The janitor gave a quiet, non-committal answer. "I've been in situations." Calder didn't push, but the unspoken recognition lingered. Something more lived behind the man's eyes. Something trained, something scarred, something that didn't belong to a mop bucket or supply closet. The doctor stepped beside him, softer now. "You saved her, you know, before we even got to her. If you hadn't kept her airway open—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Down the hall, Nova shifted weakly beneath the blankets. He swallowed hard and murmured, "I just did what I had to." Calder looked at him with a respect rarely given so quickly. "Some people freeze in crisis. You didn't. That matters." Morella's shouting continued down the corridor as officers questioned her, her voice cracking with desperation. The janitor didn't look her way. He only focused on the tiny life fighting for breath behind the glass. And as the hallway buzzed with whispers, recording notifications, and rising public outrage, one truth settled heavily. This wasn't ending here. This was only the start of the storm. The storm gathered weight the moment two more officers stepped into the hallway, their radios crackling softly against the sterile hum of hospital machines. Part 2 ended with Morella's panicked voice echoing down the corridor. Part 3 begins as the officers finally moved her into a private consultation room, the door clicking shut behind them. Her shouts dulled, replaced by muffled insistence that she barely touched anything, and that the father is exaggerating everything. The janitor didn't turn his head. He stayed anchored outside the trauma bay, hand resting on the cold metal railing beneath the window. Nova's chest rose in fragile intervals, softer than before, but steady enough to keep him breathing. Every instinct urged him to stay rooted until she opened her eyes on her own. No authority, no officer, no policy would move him from that spot unless it was to save her again. One of the officers approached quietly. "Sir, we're going to need a formal statement soon. But for now, just tell me, was there anyone else who saw what she did?" He shook his head. "She acted fast. I was unloading the car. When I turned around, the bag was already in her hand." There was no tremor in his voice, no performance, just a man reciting details the way he learned to on the field. Cleanly, clearly, without wasted breath. The officer noted the composure. "And you're sure she pressed it over the infant's face?" "Yes." "Intentional?" "Yes." Simple, direct, undeniable. Behind them, Dr. Calder exited the trauma bay again, removing his gloves with slow, controlled movements. He joined the conversation, his presence shifting the air. The baby's injury pattern, oxygen deprivation, shallow intake, airway shock, lines up exactly with what he described, and the timing is precise. Whatever she did enough. The officer nodded, jotting everything down. "Thank you, doctor." Before leaving, Calder glanced at the janitor with that same steady weight he'd carried, since recognizing competence where no one expected it. "She's stable for now. If anything changes, you'll be the first to know." Then he lowered his voice, a rare softness beneath it. "Stay close." The officer led him toward a small seating area for privacy. Security flanked the hallway, preventing Morella from approaching him, but also ensuring she couldn't slip away. Her muffled voice still leaked through the walls, rising, cracking, bargaining. Inside the small room, the officer began the formal statement process. "I need everything from the moment you arrived home." He repeated the sequence without dramatics. The groceries, the crying, the HOA clipboard, the complaint, the bag. His words were calm, but clipped, like someone conditioned to recount emergencies with clinical precision. The officer watched him carefully, noting every detail. At one point he asked, "How were you able to keep her breathing stabilized like that on the way here?" A pause. "I learned a long time ago how to keep someone alive when every second counts." The officer studied him, sensing layers that didn't match the uniform he normally wore in the hospital. But he didn't push, not yet. Outside, a sudden spike of noise broke the tension. Several nurses gasping as phones buzzed. The officer excused himself, stepping out for a moment. The janitor followed with his eyes as Lena hurried toward the nurse's station. "It's everywhere," she whispered to a coworker. "Hundreds of thousands of views already." He didn't need to ask. It was the video, the doctor's outrage, the frantic emergency, the truth laid bare. And now it was setting the city on fire. When the officer returned, he carried a new tone, firmer, more urgent. "Sir, the situation has escalated. Headquarters has been alerted to the viral video. We're assigning detectives to review the case. We'll need to retrieve the exterior footage from your house camera as well." He nodded. "I can provide it." "Good, that will help." He didn't mention that the camera had caught only fragments, not the entire act, but enough to show Morella's arm moving, the brief flash of the plastic bag, and the physical proximity to the bassinet. Not perfect evidence, but corroboration, and paired with medical findings and his statement, it mattered. The officer continued, "We're detaining her for questioning. She's not under arrest yet, but that may change pending results." At that moment, the trauma bay door opened again. Calder approached with a seriousness that made both officers straighten. "She's regained color, still weak, but breathing without assistance." He looked at the janitor directly. "You should see her." He released a shaking breath he didn't know he'd been holding and followed the doctor inside. The lights were softer now. The machines beeped a slow, reassuring rhythm. Nova lay bundled, warm, tiny fingers curled by her cheek. He reached the bedside, chest tightening. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered, brushing a hand through her hair. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was the quiet collapse of a man who'd held himself together through hell and finally allowed for a sliver of relief. Calder stepped beside him. "She's strong. She'll pull through this." He nodded, keeping his gaze on her. "She doesn't deserve any of this." "No," Calder agreed, voice firm. "But she has you." Down the hall, Morella's voice rose again, shouting something about lawyers and harassment. Officers guided her toward the exit for transport to the station. Her panic bounced off the glass walls, but didn't reach the trauma bay. She wasn't in control anymore. Not here, not now. Not after what she'd done. As she disappeared from sight, the janitor's jaw tightened. The crisis wasn't over, not with the video spreading, not with public fury rising, not with the truth only beginning to surface. And deep inside him, something old and disciplined woke fully, a part of himself. He'd buried long before parenthood, but could no longer keep silent. The storm hadn't passed. It was just clearing its throat. The storm hadn't passed. It was just clearing its throat. That final echo from Part 3 hung in the air as he remained beside Nova's crib, watching the slow rise and fall of her small chest under the warming blanket. The trauma bay dimmed to night mode lighting, casting the room in soft blues that made every monitor beep feel louder. He wasn't tired, not really. Exhaustion was familiar territory, and right now his body ran on something sharper than adrenaline, purpose. Dr. Calder stepped back into the room, clipboard pressed to his side. "She's holding steady," he said quietly. "The next few hours are important, but I'm optimistic." He nodded once, absorbing the words without loosening the tight coil in his chest. "I'll be here." Calder gave a faint, understanding smile. "I figured you would." Before he could respond, the door swung open again. A paramedic from the incoming bay, broad-shouldered, sunburned, maybe mid-30s, stepped inside with a curious look. He recognized the uniform instantly. The orange striped patches weren't new to him. They brought memories he didn't particularly want, but also never entirely escaped. "Is this the father?" the paramedic asked the doctor. Calder nodded. "Yes, he's the one who stabilized the infant before we got her." The paramedic turned his full attention toward him, scanning the man up and down with a familiarity that wasn't casual. Something had clicked. "I saw the video," he said, voice lowering. "The way you held her airway, the jaw thrust, the timing, that's not something a civilian just knows." He stiffened slightly, not defensive, just guarded. I've had some training. Some? The paramedic raised an eyebrow. You used a modified pediatric maneuver. Only certain units teach that. Calder looked between them, interest sharpening. What units? The paramedic hesitated. Combat Medic Corps. The room stilled. The janitor didn't confirm or deny. He simply adjusted the blanket around Nova and kept his gaze forward. But his silence said enough. Professionals recognize professionals. Even the way he stood, weight steady, breathing controlled, scanning without appearing to scan, told a story. Calder spoke next. That explains why you didn't freeze. He said nothing. The paramedic offered a respectful nod. You saved her life, and you saved some of my brother's lives too, even if we never met. Those words landed heavier than the man realized. He didn't look away from Nova, but something flickered in his eyes. Grief, maybe, or guilt wrapped in old dust. Calder subtly redirected. We won't push. We respect privacy here. Then he leaned closer. But I want you to know, your background won't stay hidden for long. With that video circulating, people will ask questions. He absorbed that quietly. Doesn't matter who I was, he murmured. Just who she needs me to be now. Calder nodded, humbled. Moments later, Lena peeked into the room, clutching her tablet like it was a fragile artifact. We have something you need to see, she said. He followed them into the hallway, leaving Nova watched by a monitor alarm system and a nearby nurse. Lena tapped her screen, showing a flood of notifications. The clip. It passed 500,000 views. Local news outlets are covering it. Parents are sharing it everywhere. The phrase HOA suffocation incident is trending. Calder exhaled sharply. This will bring scrutiny. It already is, she said. People are asking for the father's identity, wanting to know how he kept her alive, asking if he's a medical professional. He tensed at the last part. The paramedic crossed his arms. Sooner or later, his past will surface. And honestly, it might protect him more than he thinks. His jaw tightened. He wasn't afraid for himself. He'd survived places worse than public attention. But Nova didn't deserve to grow up with strangers dissecting her trauma online. But staying hidden was no longer an option, not with a child's life and accountability at stake. A security officer approached the group, tablet in hand. Detective Rhodes is on the way. The station wants to gather all footage and statements tonight. And they want to speak with you directly, he said, nodding at the father. Calder stepped in. He stays with his daughter. Interviews happen in here. The officer nodded respectfully. We'll accommodate that. As they walked back toward the trauma bay, two nurses whispered near the supply cabinet. Did you hear? She tried to claim the father attacked her. That doesn't match anything we've seen. She's unraveling. He heard it all, but didn't react. He simply returned to Nova's side, settling into the chair by her crib. The warmth of her small hand steadied the storm inside him, more than any reassurance words could offer. Minutes later, the paramedic lingered at the doorway. Look, if anyone gives you trouble because of your past, you call me. Men like you deserve better than being treated like a shadow. He gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Thank you. The paramedic left, and the room felt quieter, heavier but clearer. As he watched his daughter breathe with a little more strength, he realized something had shifted. His past was no longer a burden he could bury. It was becoming the backbone of a fight he didn't choose but wouldn't walk away from. Nova needed him. Justice demanded him. And the truth, once hidden, was creeping into the light. The storm wasn't done building. It had just chosen its direction. The storm had chosen its direction. That was the final beat of Part 4. Part 5 picks up in the same dim trauma bay, the quiet hum of machines, wrapping the room in a strange, suspended calm. He sat beside Nova's crib, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. Each breath steadied him, even as the world outside their small room spun faster with every passing minute. A soft knock came at the door. Lena stepped in, her tablet glowing against the dark. She hesitated before speaking. You should probably see this. He didn't move at first, still watching his daughter. Then, slowly, he stood and followed Lena into the hallway. The air shifted the moment they stepped out, buzzing with urgency, whispers, and the distinct electric pulse of something going viral in real time. Lena held up the tablet. The clip isn't just trending anymore. It exploded. On screen was the video, the doctor's scorching outburst, the frantic lobby movement, and, unavoidably, the father hunched on the floor, performing infant stabilization, with a skill that didn't match his uniform. The comments blurred in rapid-fire motion. Who trained him? That isn't a janitor move. Combat medic? This HOA lady should be in jail. Protect that baby at all costs. He watched silently, face unreadable. He'd seen virality before. News cycles, battlefield footage, moments he wished the world had never witnessed. But seeing himself in that kind of spotlight made something coil inside him. He'd spent years hiding from attention, choosing anonymity over medals, choosing janitorial work over anything that could drag him back into the shadows he crawled out from. Lena continued cautiously. A local journalist shared it. Then a parenting group picked it up. Then a safety advocacy page. It's everywhere. He didn't respond. Instead, he asked, "Where's Calder?" In the conference alcove, media is calling the hospital nonstop. He followed her, each step slow but sure. The hallway felt narrower than before, boxed in by staring eyes, nurses, techs, paramedics, suddenly piecing together that the man they passed daily in the corridors had just performed a maneuver they couldn't master on mannequins. Part of the victory strategy unfolded here. The community shifting, public pressure rising, truth cracking open. They found Calder standing before a curved window, phone pressed to his ear. His shoulders were tight, posture sharp, someone juggling integrity with chaos. When he saw him, the doctor held up a finger, finished the call quickly, then let out a controlled exhale. "That was Channel 8, Calder said. "They want an interview." He grimaced. "No, I already declined," the doctor added. "Your privacy still matters." He appreciated that more than he said. Calder gestured toward the tablet. "This video, it's forcing conversations we don't usually have. People are questioning power, accountability, safety." He paused. "And your part in it is raising even more questions." He braced. Himself. "I didn't ask for any of that." "I know," Calder said. "But you stepped into a crisis and did something extraordinary. You need to be prepared for the reactions." Prepared. He'd spent years trying not to be. Before he could respond, a breathless nurse hurried toward them. "Doctor, the HOA is trending too. People found their page. Comments are brutal. They shut it down." Calder didn't hide his satisfaction. "They enabled someone dangerous. It's about time they felt consequences," the nurse added. "And several parents in the community are organizing a complaint push. They want to speak to you," she told the father. "They're calling you the Protector." He looked away immediately. The nickname felt wrong, heavy, misplaced. "I'm no protector," he muttered. "Just a dad." Calder shook his head. "You're both. And sometimes that's exactly what people need." The nurse's pager beeped. She hurried off, leaving the two men in a pocket of quiet. Then the paramedic from earlier returned, phone in hand. You really need to see this." He turned the screen toward them. Someone had zoomed in on the viral clip. The focus wasn't on Calder's fury or the chaos. It was Nova's hospital tag, the tiny pink band with her name barely visible. The image had become a symbol online, shared thousands of times with captions like, "Protect the voiceless." "Hold power accountable." "Never let this happen again." The father inhaled sharply. That little band wasn't supposed to be anyone's rallying cry. It was supposed to be a quiet part of her first days in the world. He handed the phone back. "People shouldn't use her like this." "They're not using her," the paramedic said. "They're standing with her, with you." He didn't answer. Suddenly, an announcement crackled overhead. "Detective Rhodes to ER intake." He tensed. Calder sensed it instantly. "You don't have to worry," the doctor assured him. "This detective is good, fair. Doesn't change what she did," he said quietly. "No," Calder agreed. "But now, the world knows." Detective Rhodes arrived moments later, a composed woman with clipped steps and a notebook already open. She greeted Calder, then turned toward the father. "I'm here to speak with you," she said, "but I'll keep it brief so you can return to your daughter." He nodded. "Ask what you need." Rhodes cut straight to the essentials: sequence, timing, physical actions, audio context. He recounted every detail with calm clarity. the same way he'd done in Part 3, only now under a sharper investigative lens. She closed her notebook. Your statement matches the preliminary evidence, and the video has forced this case to priority status. Meaning what? Meaning the HOA officer is facing serious charges, and your account will carry weight. He didn't react outwardly, but something eased. Inside, when Rhodes left, Calder placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "This is your storm," he said, "but you're not weathering it alone." He didn't answer, only looked through the trauma window at Nova's tiny frame. The world was erupting outside. But in here, everything stayed anchored to one truth. The fight had only begun. The fight had only begun. That's where Part 5 ended, and Part 6 picks up right there, with him still standing at the trauma bay window, watching Nova's slow, steady breaths. The hospital remained dim, nighttime hours settling in, but outside that protective bubble, the world was roaring. Notifications from staff phones buzzed like insects. Whispers rippled through hallways, and the weight of viral outrage wrapped itself around the building like a tightening wire. Calder stepped away briefly to update another team, leaving the father alone with his thoughts. He didn't move from the glass. He couldn't. Every rise of Nova's chest pressed down on the memory of that plastic mailer bag in Morella's hand. A moment he replayed unwillingly, each time feeling the same cold spike along his spine. Then a new sound cut the quiet, the sharp click of high heels against polished tile. A group approached from the far corner, 3 members of the Rosemero Estates HOA board, faces pulled tight with panic, irritation, and forced dignity. Their expensive coats and perfectly clipped lanyards looked painfully out of place in the emergency unit. People in this hallway fought for life. These 3 fought for reputation. The tallest man stepped forward. "We need to speak with the father," he announced, tone stiff with practiced authority. The security guard, already alert from previous chaos, intercepted them. "He's with his daughter. You'll wait." "We're not here to cause trouble," the woman in the group insisted. "We're trying to contain damage." Those words made his jaw tighten. Contain damage, not apologize, not accept responsibility, not ask whether the infant was alive, just containment. Calder reappeared right on time, smearing sanitizer across his hands. "Absolutely not," he told them. "This isn't a PR meeting. This is a medical ward." The HOA president stiffened. "We just want to clarify that the board had no knowledge of—" "You'll clarify nothing," Calder snapped. "Your officer endangered a newborn. That's the only fact that matters right now." The board members faltered under the weight of the doctor's fury, but the father turned, silent, expression unreadable. He didn't step closer, didn't speak. He simply watched them with the same calm precision he used on the battlefield. It was unsettling enough that the HOA members shifted uneasily, like prey that suddenly sensed a predator without seeing its teeth. The shorter man in the group cleared his throat. "Look, we understand appearances look bad." Calder laughed sharply. "Appearances?" The woman hurried on, flustered. "We want to offer assistance, whatever you need. Legal coverage, reimbursements, anything to show our sincerity." The father answered quietly, "I don't need anything from you." The woman blinked. "But this is a serious situation." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. But something about the stillness in him made the hallway colder. "You didn't come here because you care," he said. "You came because the world is watching." The HOA president bristled. "Sir, with all due, you let someone like her enforce rules," he cut in. "You empowered her, and now you want to wash your hands of the consequences." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, the shorter man tried a desperate pivot. "We'd like to collect your side of the story for our internal review." Calder stepped between them instantly. "He's already given a statement to law enforcement. Anything else goes through them." His voice lowered to controlled ice. "You don't get to manage this." The board members exchanged frantic whispers, realizing they were losing control of a narrative they had hoped to contain. They backed away slowly, but before leaving, the woman murmured, "This will destroy the community's reputation." The father looked at her levelly. "Good." They hurried out, faces pale. When they were gone, Calder let out a slow exhale. "They weren't here for you," he said. "They were here for themselves." "I know. Doesn't bother you?" "No." His gaze returned to the trauma bay. "Nothing they do matters anymore." Calder studied him. This quiet man who didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't break, just stood like an unmoving pillar while power structures buckled around him. "You're calm under pressure," the doctor murmured. "It's not normal." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The doctor already knew. Minutes later, Detective Rhodes arrived again, holding a folder. "We obtained HOA internal emails," she announced. They pressured officers to enforce quiet hour penalties aggressively to reduce neighborhood complaints before an upcoming real estate evaluation. Calder scoffed. "So, this was about property value?" Rhodes nodded. "Preliminary evidence suggests yes." The father's expression didn't shift, but inside, something finally clicked into place. The answer to why Morella had been so extreme, so reckless. She wasn't just abusing power, she was performing for it. Rhodes continued. "This strengthens your case. The board will face scrutiny too." He nodded once. "Good." The detective's tone softened a fraction. "I want you to know. Your daughter's condition, your quick response, the video, it's rallying people in ways we rarely see." He didn't want to think about that yet. Not until Nova opened her eyes. Calder stepped in. "You should take a break. Eat something. Breathe." He shook his head. "Not until she wakes up." Lena approached just then, her voice gentle. She moved a little. Just a twitch, but it's something. He closed his eyes, relief rippling through him like a quiet tide. Calder whispered, "She's fighting." He nodded, emotion tightening his chest. "She gets that from her mother." It was the first personal thing he'd said all night. Lena recognized it instantly, her eyes softening. The storm outside was escalating. Media requests, community outrage, HOA collapse. But none of that mattered in the trauma bay. Here, it was just a father, a child, and the steady beat of machines promising another breath. And as he returned to Nova's side, one thing became clear. The crisis had opened the world's eyes. But it was only beginning to reveal his. The crisis had opened the world's eyes, but it was only beginning to reveal his. That final line of Part 6 carried straight into the moment Part 7 begins. He sank back into the chair at Nova's bedside, one hand lightly resting near her tiny fingers. The trauma bay lights remained dim, a soft hum filling the room, like a heartbeat in the walls. For the first time since arriving, her eyelids fluttered in a slow, uncertain twitch. He leaned forward instantly. "That's it. Keep going," he whispered. Nova's fingers curled minutely, her breathing deepening by a fraction. It was small progress, barely measurable by machines, but to him, it felt like the world was finally tilting in the right direction. The storm could snarl and rage outside, but this moment, here, eclipsed everything. A nurse stepped in quietly. "She's responding well. The oxygen saturation is improving." "Thank you," he murmured, meaning it. The nurse gave a reassuring nod and slipped out. But before the door could close, raised voices echoed down the hall, voices he recognized instantly. Sharp, defensive, panicked. Morella. She had somehow found her way back toward the trauma corridor, pushing past a security officer and two nurses attempting to block her. "I demand to see him," she insisted, voice cracking. "This entire thing has been blown out of proportion. I deserve to explain myself." Security held firm, but the commotion grew loud enough that Calder stormed out of a nearby consultation room. "That's enough," he barked. Morella spun toward him. "You don't understand. If he keeps lying, my life is ruined." Calder's expression turned to stone. "Your actions nearly ruined a newborn's life. You don't get to play the victim here." She pointed wildly toward the trauma bay. "I didn't hurt her. I barely touched anything. This is all overreaction. Internet hysteria. People twisting things." Her words tangled on desperation, her voice rising with each sentence. The hospital walls absorbed the panic, but the staff didn't. Nurses gave her cold, disbelieving looks. The paramedic standing near the station crossed his arms. Even the officers stiffened. The father didn't stand or approach. He stayed by Nova's crib, watching through the window. He would not go to her. She would come to him only through law and consequence, not chaos. Detective Rhodes arrived seconds later, steps sharp and decisive. "Ms. Voss," she said firmly, "you were instructed to remain in the station lobby until further notice. You were placed under preliminary detainment. Leaving without permission is violation number 1, Morella reeled back. But I need to defend myself. You'll do that during official questioning, Rhodes replied, not by barging into critical care. Security moved closer. Calder folded his arms. You're not stepping 1 foot near that infant. Morella's rage cracked into something else. Fear. This can't be happening. I'm not a criminal. Then stop acting like one, Rhodes said, because fleeing detainment certainly argues otherwise. I didn't flee, she protested. I stepped outside for air. To what? The detective countered. To call your lawyer? Or to meet with HOA board members who are currently denying any association with you? Morella froze. Her mouth opened, then closed, no words coming. Rhodes continued. I've reviewed internal HOA emails. I know the board pushed for aggressive quiet hour enforcement. I know you were their primary tool, but I also know you took that pressure and escalated it recklessly. Morella paled. You can't pin this on me alone. No one is pinning anything, Rhodes said. We're following facts, and the facts point to you making a dangerous choice. Calder interjected, a choice that nearly suffocated a newborn. The hallway fell into an icy silence. Then Morella snapped. I told you, I barely touched her. He's exaggerating because he hates us. He didn't say a word online, Calder shot back. The world saw what you nearly caused. Nobody needed his opinion to see the truth. A tremor ran through Morella's hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she whispered. I was just trying to keep peace. Everyone's always complaining about babies crying and people breaking rules. I thought, you didn't think, Rhodes cut in. You acted, and your action has consequences. Security moved to escort her away, but she lunged, trying to push past them toward the trauma bay door. Let me talk to him. He has to understand. I didn't mean... Calder moved faster than anyone expected, blocking her path completely. Stay back. The father didn't rise, didn't speak. His presence alone, calm and unmoving behind the glass, was enough to halt her. She stared at him through the window, at the quiet man she'd tried to intimidate earlier that day. Now she shook under her own unraveling. Rhodes approached her with handcuffs. Ms. Voss, you are being taken in for full questioning. Any further interference with medical operations will be added to your charges. No, wait, please. But the cuffs clicked shut. They guided her toward the exit. Her shouts echoed down the corridor, softer with each step, until the doors sealed behind her. Only then did Calder step into the trauma bay. She's gone, he said gently. He nodded once. Good. The doctor studied him. You didn't react, not once. He kept his focus on his daughter. She's not worth the energy. Calder considered that, then spoke quietly. Strength doesn't always come from speaking. Sometimes it comes from choosing where to stand. He didn't look up. I stand with her. Nova shifted, eyes fluttering again. Her breathing a little fuller now. The room exhaled with her. Outside, the storm raged. Inside the trauma bay, a father stayed steady, unshaken, unmoved, and ready for whatever came next. Because, for the first time since the crisis began, the path ahead was clear. Justice wasn't just possible, it was already on its way. Justice wasn't just possible, it was already on its way. That's where Part 7 ended, and Part 8 begins right in that charged silence inside the trauma bay. Nova's breathing deepened by faint but steady increments, and the father stayed anchored at her side, one hand resting near her tiny fingers. The world outside kept roaring, but in here, everything narrowed to the soft sound of her inhaling and exhaling. But the storm didn't stay outside for long. The automatic doors at the end of the hallway slid open, and a wave of murmurs swept through the ER. People were gathering, more than before. Not patients, not staff, neighbors, parents, strangers who had watched the viral clip and felt something gnaw at them. Men in work boots, women with strollers, college students with backpacks slung over their shoulders, they'd all shown up. One nurse hurried into the trauma bay. They're here for you, she whispered. He didn't turn. I'm staying with her. That's fine, she said softly. But they came to show support. Support. It was a foreign concept in a world where he'd spent years trying not to be seen. But the crowd pressed closer to the ER doors, and whispers grew louder, filled with concern rather than curiosity. Calder entered the trauma bay, wiping his hands on a towel. The community is demanding answers, he said. And for once, they're not attacking the wrong person. He didn't respond. His eyes remained on Nova. Calder took a breath. You don't have to talk to anyone, but people are fighting for your daughter, for you. Outside, a chant grew from a handful of voices into a steady wave. Protect the baby! Protect the baby! Some held signs made quickly from printer paper and cardboard. No more Sheol abuse. Infants are not noise. Justice for Nova. He hadn't expected this. He didn't know how to feel about strangers chanting his daughter's name. But the power of it, raw, unfiltered, uncoordinated, was undeniable. Detective Rhodes returned, moving with purpose. I've just spoken with the state attorney, she said. Given the public outcry and the medical evidence, charges will likely escalate. Child endangerment is the minimum. He didn't cheer, didn't smile, but something inside him lightened, just barely. Rhodes continued, and the HOA board has now officially suspended Morella. They issued a statement trying to distance themselves, but the community isn't buying it. Calder scoffed. They'll try anything to preserve their image. Rhodes nodded. Yes, but public sentiment isn't on their side, and neither is the law. She then looked directly at the father. Do you want protection? We can assign officers to watch your home if needed. He shook his head. I'll handle it. She studied him, not dismissively, but with a dawning understanding. Yes, she said quietly. I believe you will. A sharp buzz echoed from the nurse's station, and Lena poked her head into the trauma bay. It's the neighbors, she said breathlessly. They want to give you something. No, he murmured immediately. I don't want anything. It's not money, she said quickly. Just support. He looked reluctant, but Calder gently placed a hand on his shoulder. You can stand in the doorway. You won't leave her side. Reluctantly, he rose. He stepped to the trauma bay entrance, staying close enough that he could still see Nova. The moment the crowd caught sight of him, the hallway went silent, completely silent. A silence filled not with expectations, but with respect. The first person to speak was a woman in a faded hoodie, clutching a stroller. We're here because what happened to your little girl was wrong, she said, and we're not letting them sweep it under the rug. A man in a construction vest added, That HOA has bullied families for years. You're the first person who pushed back without even trying. Another voice chimed in. You protected her. Now we protect you. He didn't know what to say. Gratitude wasn't a language he had practiced often, but the sincerity in their voices settled like armor around him, unexpected but welcome. A teenager stepped forward with a small bundle wrapped in a knitted cloth. My mom made this for your baby, she said. It's just a blanket, but we wanted her to have something warm. He accepted it with a nod, unable to fully speak. The weight of it, soft, handmade, human, pressed into him deeply. Calder stepped beside him. See, he murmured, not all storms destroy, some build. Before he could reply, another wave of whispers flowed down the hall. Reporters had arrived outside the hospital entrance, but security held them back. Only community members were allowed through. Detective Rhodes received a call and stepped aside to answer. When she returned, her expression was resolute. Updates from the station, Morella tried to alter her story again, claimed she accidentally lifted the bag. But we've recovered neighborhood security footage. His eyes narrowed. Footage? Yes, she said. Another home's doorbell camera caught her approaching the porch with the bag already in her hand. It's blurry, but enough to contradict her statements. Evidence, more than he'd expected, more than he'd hoped for. Calder couldn't hide his satisfaction. She cornered herself. The father took a slow breath. She cornered herself the moment she touched my child. Rhodes nodded in agreement. Security then moved down the hallway, organizing the crowd so medical staff could pass safely. But the people didn't disperse. They remained present. Unified, protective. One thing was clear now. The community wasn't just watching. They were choosing sides, and they had chosen his. He stepped back into the trauma bay, blanket in hand, and placed it gently beside Nova. She twitched again, breath steadying, as though sensing the shift in the air. The world was rising for her, and so was he. The world was rising for her, and so was he. That's where Part 8 ended, and Part 9 begins with him returning to the chair beside Nova's crib. the knitted blanket folded carefully near her feet. The trauma bay lights remained low, but something in the air had changed. Tension still pulsed through the hospital, but it was no longer just fear or outrage. There was purpose, direction, momentum. Nova's breathing continued to strengthen, each faint inhale steadier than the last. He watched her tiny chest move beneath the blanket, every rise a reminder of why he couldn't break. Not here, not now, not when she had fought her way back with a newborn's fragile courage. Calder entered quietly, carrying a printed chart and wearing the expression of someone who just finished arguing with administration. "Vitals are improving," he said softly. "She's young, resilient. Babies can surprise you." He nodded, eyes never leaving Nova. "She gets that from her mother." Calder didn't pry. He just took a seat nearby, letting the silence fill the space with a kind of mutual understanding. But the moment was interrupted by the sudden buzzing of hospital staff phones, and then a murmur rolling through the corridor like a low wave. Someone said, "Is that him?" Another whispered, "Look, same posture." A voice farther down, "It's definitely him." Before he could decipher what they were reacting to, Lena burst into the trauma bay, breathless. "You need to see this," she said, holding out her phone. He hesitated, then took it. A new video was trending. This one not from the hospital, but from a veteran's social media group. The screen showed a rugged man in a dimly lit garage, wearing a faded military tee, eyes intense as he spoke into the camera. "I saw the clip going around, the one with the doctor yelling," the man said, "but it wasn't the doctor that caught my attention. It was the father, the way he stabilized that baby. There's only one unit that teaches that maneuver under leave fire conditions." He paused, breath shaking slightly. "I recognize him. He saved my brother during the Alara collapse, pulled 3 men from a smoke-filled barracks with 0 visibility and kept them alive until evacuation. We never learned his name back then, but that's him." The camera zoomed in on a still frame of the father from the hospital clip, kneeling on the floor, hands expertly aligned on Nova's airway. "That man isn't just a janitor. He's a medic who carried lives on his back. He deserves respect. Give him space. Support him. And don't let that HOA monster get away with what she did." Lena whispered, "It already has over 200,000 shares." For a moment he couldn't breathe, not out of fear, out of something deeper, something he'd buried. Recognition was the last thing he wanted. The past was supposed to stay behind him. But now it was bleeding into the present, piece by piece, frame by frame. Calder watched him carefully. "It was only a matter of time," he said gently. "Your skill. It isn't something people forget." He set the phone aside. "I didn't want this." "But maybe it's what's needed," Calder said. "You kept your daughter alive with training most doctors never get. People see that. They respect it." He shook his head slowly. "Respect isn't the goal." "What is?" He looked at Nova. "Safety?" Before Calder could respond, commotion erupted outside the trauma bay. A familiar voice cut through the noise, a voice he hadn't heard in years. "Where is he?" "Give him space," a nurse warned. "I need to see him." The door swung open. A man in dusty boots and a worn field jacket stepped inside. His face carried weathered lines, a shaved jaw, and eyes that held recognition the moment they met his. "Sergeant," the man said quietly. He stiffened. It had been years since anyone addressed him like that. "I don't use that title anymore." The man approached with slow respect. "You saved 5 of us in the Alara collapse. I was one of them." Calder's eyebrows lifted. Lena's breath caught. The hallway fell still. The father didn't know what to say. He rarely thought of those days, those nights, those decisions. They were ghosts he learned to live with, not memories he wanted resurfacing. The soldier, no, former soldier, swallowed hard. "I saw the video. I recognized you instantly. The way you held the baby. It was the same way you held my brother when we thought he wouldn't make it." He looked down, jaw tight. The soldier continued, "I owe you my family, my life. And seeing what happened to your daughter," his voice cracked, "I'm here to stand. With you. Whatever you need." He didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't break. But something unspoken settled in his chest. Solid, grounding. The kind of loyalty forged only in places most people never survived. "I don't need repayment," he said quietly. "I know. the soldier replied. But you're getting it anyway. Behind him, several more veterans stepped into view, having followed the first man. Different ages, different uniforms, same eyes. Calder stepped back, letting the moment breathe. One of the veterans nodded at him respectfully. Your daughter's alive because of what you knew, because of who you were, and who you still are. He closed his eyes momentarily. When he opened them, Nova's monitor beeped softly, marking another tiny improvement. He whispered, "She's the only mission that matters now." "And we're here for that mission," the soldier said. Lena exhaled shakily. Calder looked humbled. The father turned back toward the crib, placing a gentle hand near Nova's head. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. Not in the hospital, not against the HOA, not against the storm. The past hadn't come to haunt him. It had come to stand with him. The past hadn't come to haunt him. It had come to stand with him. That's where Part 9 ended, and Part 10 begins with the trauma bay crowded quietly by men who once trusted him with their lives. They didn't speak loudly. They didn't approach Nova's crib. They simply formed a silent perimeter outside the trauma room, a wall of lived experience and unspoken loyalty. He stood beside Nova, eyes tracking her breathing, but he felt the presence behind him like a shield. In the military, silence meant readiness. Here, it meant reverence. Calder stepped in, surveying the group with a mix of awe and understanding. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured. "It's what happens when a man saves lives," the first soldier replied. "People remember." He remained silent. Praise never sat well with him. It always felt like being dragged backward into a world he'd left behind for good reason. But the soldiers weren't here to drag him anywhere. They were here to hold the line. Moments later, Detective Rhodes entered, her expression determined. She held a stack of printed documents, bundled and clipped. "We have enough to move forward," she said to him. "I came to update you." He nodded, but didn't move away from Nova. "The footage from your neighbor's doorbell camera," she continued, "combined with statements, your 911 call, the medical evidence, and Morella's multiple contradictory claims, it's enough for full arrest and charges." Calder crossed his arms. "What charges?" "Child endangerment, reckless harm, and obstruction." One of the soldiers let out a low breath. "She's getting exactly what she earned." Rhodes wasn't finished. "The HOA board is under investigation too. They're internal. Emails show deliberate pressure to enforce rules aggressively, especially targeting families with children. It's a systemic problem." Another soldier muttered, "Figures, those boards are always about power." Rhodes nodded. "Their influence doesn't help them now. Public outrage is pushing this case forward faster than anything I've seen in months." He stayed steady, eyes on Nova. "Good." A subtle shift came over Rhodes. "There's something else. The press conference is happening outside right now. The chief, the state attorney. It's becoming a major case." Lena hurried in behind her, tablet in hand. "It's huge! Reporters, activists, parents. People are flooding the sidewalk." Calder sighed. "And they'll want to drag him into it." "No," Rhodes said firmly. "I'm protecting him from that. He doesn't need cameras shoved in his face while his daughter recovers." He appreciated that, even if he didn't say it. Outside the trauma bay window, the small crowd from earlier had grown. Veterans, neighbors, parents, strangers holding signs with Nova's name. The knitted blanket from the teenager lay gently near her. A symbol he didn't ask for, but couldn't deny, had meaning. Then the overhead intercom crackled. "Security to ER entrance. Attention to ER entrance." He straightened instinctively. Rhodes listened on her radio, then looked up. "It's the HOA board. They're trying to give a statement to the press." Calder scoffed. "Trying to control the narrative." Rhodes's lips thinned. Not for long. She left the trauma bay with purpose. The soldiers followed her to watch, lined across the hallway like sentinels. He didn't step out. He stayed with Nova, but he watched through the large front windows at the end of the hall, where the crowd had gathered outside the hospital doors. The HOA board, shaken, stiff, clearly terrified, stood before microphones. Their president spoke first. "We want the community to know we had no involvement in..." A voice from the crowd cut in. "You encouraged her!" Another shouted, "You created this mess!" Camera flashes went off like lightning. The board stuttered. They tried to pivot to sympathy, tried to say they cared, tried to apologize without apologizing. but in the middle of their stumbling speech, a familiar figure stepped forward. Detective Rhodes. The crowd quieted instantly. She raised a hand. Press, community members, listen carefully. This is now a criminal investigation. The HOA officer has been charged, and the board's internal communications will be reviewed for additional wrongdoing. This is not a PR situation. This is a matter of child safety. Gasps rippled through the spectators. One reporter asked, "Is the father involved in the press conference?" "No," Rhodes said. "He is with his daughter, exactly where he should be." The soldiers behind her nodded. Inside the hospital, he watched the scene unfold. Through the glass reflection, he didn't need to be out there. His silence was louder than anything the HOA could fabricate. Calder returned to the trauma bay. Rhodes shut them down. "Good," he said again, same calm tone. "You're really not shaken by any of this, are you?" the doctor asked. He adjusted Nova's blanket. "I've seen worse. I've lived worse. This is just clarity." Calder studied him with quiet admiration. "Most men would be overwhelmed, but you just keep standing." He didn't answer, but his stillness said enough. Minutes later, Rhodes returned. "Formal arrest completed. Morella is being transported, and the HOA is collapsing under public pressure." He nodded once. "You understand what this means, right?" Rhodes said. "You've set a precedent. People are standing up because you didn't break." He looked down at Nova. "I didn't stand up for them." "No," Rhodes said. "You stood for her," and they followed. The soldiers filed back to the hallway, forming a quiet, protective wall again. One of them murmured, "We're here until she wakes up. You got us through hell. We can get you through this." He breathed slowly, deeply, feeling a weight lift, not from justice, not from exposure, but from the presence of people who stood without being asked. Nova stirred, turning her head ever so slightly. He leaned in, whispering, "I'm right here." Outside, the world continued its roar. Inside, a father remained unshaken. The path to justice was no longer uncertain. It was unfolding in real time. The path to justice was no longer uncertain. It was unfolding in real time. That's where Part 10 ended, and Part 11 begins with the father still seated at Nova's bedside, the trauma bay quiet except for the steady, rhythmic beeping of her monitors. She shifted again, her breathing deeper now, her face less strained. He brushed a fingertip against her hand, and this time, her tiny fingers curled faintly around his. A nurse noticed and smiled. "That's a good sign," she whispered. "She's responding." He nodded, eyes softening for the first time since the ordeal began. "She's fighting." The nurse gently adjusted Nova's IV line. "She knows you're here." He didn't move from that spot. He wouldn't. Not until she opened her eyes. Outside the trauma bay, the energy from the crowd had shifted. Where earlier there had been outrage and chants, now there was unity, people holding warm drinks, passing blankets, whispering in hushed tones. Parents rocked their babies. Veterans stood in a quiet line along the wall. Even medical staff paused when walking past, their eyes acknowledging the gravity of what this father had endured. Detective Rhodes re-entered the trauma bay, tapping lightly on the doorframe before stepping inside. "It's done," she said. "Morella is in county holding. Bail is being contested due to flight risk and severity of charges." Ye didn't look up. "Good. And the HOA?" Calder asked. Rhodes exhaled. "2 board members have resigned. The rest are under investigation for policy misconduct and negligence. The state attorney wants to meet with you tomorrow to discuss a protective order and civil options." He remained still but alert. "Later," he said. "She wakes first." Calder placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then she wakes first." Just then, Lena hurried in, clearly shaken. "You all need to see this," she said, holding out her tablet. The screen displayed a live stream, news helicopters circling above the hospital, the street below flooded with people. Reporters narrated everything, from Morella's arrest to the board's collapse, to the viral clip showing the father performing the advanced airway maneuver on Nova. The headline scroll read, "Unidentified hero father saves newborn, ex-military medic?" Calder sighed. It was only a matter of time, but it wasn't the headline that made Lena nervous. It was the interview playing beneath it. A well-dressed man stood at the hospital perimeter, expensive suit, polished shoes, hair slicked back, the look of someone used to making decisions. The Karen beneath him read, HOA Legal Representative, Live. Let me be clear, the man said smoothly. Our community has always prioritized peace. This situation is tragic, but the father's reaction is being sensationalized. HOA officers are volunteers. They don't undergo special training. Sometimes mistakes happen. The father's jaw tightened. Mistake? Calder snapped. She suffocated a baby. The lawyer continued. We have concerns about the accuracy of the viral narrative. The father's background remains hidden. People with military training can misinterpret civilian behavior. The soldiers watching from the hallway instantly stiffened. One muttered, He didn't just say that. Another clenched his fists. Coward, Detective Rhodes bristled. He's trying to discredit you before charges stick. Then the lawyer added, If the father had simply complied with HOA protocols, this wouldn't have escalated. The trauma bay went silent. Calder exploded. Complied? With suffocating a baby? But the father didn't raise his voice. He didn't speak at all. Instead, he stood, slowly, deliberately, and walked toward the trauma bay entrance, stopping at the glass where he could see the crowd and the screens showing the broadcast. His reflection stared back at him. Calm, controlled, unbroken. Lena whispered, What do you want to do? He turned back to Nova. Her fingers twitched again, gripping slightly more than before. I'm not leaving her, he said. You don't have to, Rhodes replied. Give me 5 minutes. She strode out of the trauma bay and down the hall with purpose, the soldiers following like shadows. Through the windows, the crowd parted as she approached the news. Cameras. The HOA lawyer continued speaking until she stepped directly into the frame. Detective, the reporter said awkwardly. She held up her badge. I have a correction to issue. The camera snapped toward her. The lawyer faltered. The father's actions did not escalate anything, Rhodes said, voice steady. They saved a life. The only person responsible for the harm done is the woman currently in custody. Any attempt to redirect blame toward the victim's family will be treated as obstruction. The reporter blinked. Detective, so you confirm the father acted appropriately? I confirm he acted with exceptional skill. And I confirm the HOA representative is mischaracterizing the situation to protect himself from scrutiny. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One veteran outside said loudly, That's what integrity looks like. The HOA lawyer deflated, shrinking beneath the weight of public eyes and undeniable truth. Inside, the soldiers exchanged proud glances. Calder smiled for the first time that day. Lena wiped a tear, but the father stayed focused. He returned to Nova, leaning over her gently. You're safe, he whispered. No one is taking that from you. Her eyelids fluttered, long, trembling flutters this time. Then, with effort so delicate it broke every heart in the room, her eyes cracked open for the first time since the crisis. Calder froze. A nurse choked back a gasp. One of the soldiers covered his mouth. The father inhaled sharply. Hey, he whispered, voice breaking just enough to reveal the depth of everything he'd held together. I'm here. Nova blinked slowly, as if recognizing the sound. The storm outside faded. The world beyond the trauma bay, lawyers, reporters, crowds, chaos, fell silent in comparison. All that mattered was this moment. A newborn opening her eyes with her father, standing unshaken beside her. Justice was moving. Community was rising. The truth was unfolding. And Nova was waking. Nova was waking. That's where Part 11 ended, and Part 12 begins in the exact breath that followed. Her small eyes opened wider, blinking against the dim trauma bay lights. The father leaned in, his face the first shape she focused on, and her tiny fingers curled toward him as though she'd been searching for that presence the entire time. The beeping monitors adjusted, their rhythm shifting from uncertainty to stabilization. She wasn't just alive, she was present. Calder's voice cracked softly. She's responding beautifully. The father didn't speak. He couldn't, not in that moment. Every emotion he'd held back through chaos, shame, confrontation, and exposure surged at once, but none spilled over. He stayed steady because she needed steadiness. But his eyes told the truth. This was the moment he'd fought for with every part of himself. Detective Rhodes stepped into the bay quietly, as if entering a sacred space. Her voice, softened. "She's awake?" He nodded once. "Good," she whispered. "She deserves to see the world fighting for her." Outside the trauma bay window, that same world remained gathered. The crowd had grown even more, parents holding candles, veterans standing with arms crossed, neighbors who once walked past him without a second glance now standing vigil. News crews were still outside, but the hospital and roads kept them far enough away. The energy wasn't spectacle now. It was solidarity. A nurse approached with a warm cloth, gently wiping Nova's face. "She's breathing on her own," she said. "We'll monitor her, but she's over the first major hurdle." Calder added, "Her oxygen levels are strong. She's safe. Safe." The word finally landed the way it should, not as hope, not as possibility, but as truth. One of the soldiers stepped to the doorway. "She's tough," he said quietly. "Just like her old man?" The father managed the faintest nod. "She didn't get that from me," he whispered. "She was born with it." Another soldier, older, weathered, voice steady, replied, "Maybe. But kids learn how to fight from what stands beside them." Nova blinked slowly, her gaze soft but aware. He let her tiny fingers wrap around the edge of his thumb, a fragile grip, but full of life. Detective Rhodes cleared her throat. "We concluded the press briefing. The HOA representative was shut down. The public's on your side, and the state attorney will file the formal charges in the morning." He didn't respond immediately. His world had narrowed to one child, but after a moment he said quietly, "As long as she's safe, the rest doesn't matter." "That's exactly why people rallied," Rhodes said. "Because you weren't fighting for attention. You were fighting for your daughter." Calder stepped out of the room to give them space. The soldiers remained nearby, a silent line of support. Lena entered with water bottles and tissues she knew wouldn't be used. She whispered, "The whole hospital is talking about her. Everyone's praying, hoping, watching." He brushed Nova's cheek gently. "She doesn't need the world watching. She just needs quiet." And as if the universe heard him, a soft hush fell over the hallway. Rhodes stepped closer. "There's something you should know. Public pressure means the state intends to pursue the strongest charges possible. Her attempt to alter the story backfired. They believe her actions were deliberate." He didn't flinch. "They were. And your identity," she added. "It's no longer speculation. The veteran community confirmed it. People know who you were." "Who I was doesn't matter now." Rhodes shook her head. "You don't understand. It matters to them. It matters because men like you don't get enough recognition when it counts. This time, it counts." Nova's small hand tightened around him again, grounding him. The nurse smiled. "She knows your voice," he exhaled. "I hope she never has to hear it like she did tonight." "She won't," the nurse promised, "not with half the state ready to form a human wall for her." Outside, the crowd began humming a soft lullaby, dozens of voices joining into something gentle, unintentionally calming the hospital hallway. Calder, watching through the glass, murmured, "I've never seen anything like this." One of the veterans answered, "That's what happens when truth is undeniable." The father lifted Nova slightly, letting her rest against the crook of his arm, her head tilted, tiny breaths warming his chest. "Hey," he whispered, "you're safe. I've got you." She blinked again, longer this time, then relaxed, content, trusting him completely. A quiet triumph spread across the trauma bay. No dramatic music, no applause, no spotlight. Just a newborn settling into the steady heartbeat of the man who refused to let her slip away. Calder stepped back in. "She'll likely be moved out of critical care within the day. She's recovering fast." He nodded. "She's stronger than all of us." "Maybe," Calder said softly. "Or maybe she just needed someone willing to stand between her and the worst of the world." The soldier at the doorway added, "And you did." He didn't argue, because for the first time that night, he believed it. Nova's eyes fluttered once more before drifting closed, not from danger, but from comfort. He didn't let go. He wouldn't. Outside the trauma bay, the community stood. Inside, a father held his daughter, and justice was no longer coming. It was here. Subscribe, and don't miss our next story. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?